The poem I want to share with you today is about a sword being forged by the greatest craftsman that has ever and ever will exist. And that's God. He's the one that took us while we were still in the wombs of our mothers, and he formed us. And the same God that formed us in the womb of our mothers is oftentimes helping form who he desires for us to be. He's wanting us to become something beyond who we see ourselves as. And oftentimes it's a process that isn't so enjoyable. Sometimes there's pain involved in the process. Just like there's pain involved in the process of a mother giving birth, there's pain in the process of greatness being birthed within us. And I use the example of a sword because if you've ever seen a sword being made, it's metal. Metal must be purged, it must be forged, and you take the metal and you put it in the heat, and it's hot and it's hot and it's till it's smoldering hot and to the point of being melted. And then you take it out and you put it in the water, and then after you take it out of the water, you beat it and you beat it and you beat it, and then after you do that, you do the whole process over and over and over again. And a great sword is going to have to go through this process many and many of times before it can be a sword worthy for battle. And so a lot of times that's the process going on in our lives. And we might find ourselves in the fire. We might find ourselves burning and just the heat of temptation and trials, and then the next thing we're in the presence of God, and we're enjoying his presence, and we're being filled, and we're having revelation and great understanding being poured into us. And the next thing you know, we're being beaten and the winds of the trials of life and the tribulations, the cursing, the words of man coming against us and beating upon us, and then it's all over again. And we wonder, when will this ever end? When will we ever find a peace? Well, I want you to know that there is a place of peace, and it's a garden that's inside of you. It's a place where you can be alone with God at any given moment, at any given time. And I want you to understand that the one that's forming you, the one that's allowing the beating, the one that's allowing the trials, the one that's pouring in the wisdom and revelation during the time of the waters, it's all the same. It's God. God is trying to create something in you that you do not yet see. Oftentimes I've said before, we're counted off, or we're counted out of the race. But God doesn't see that. Oftentimes there's a champion being made in all the years. Even if you look at the lives of David, of Abraham, of Moses, Moses, here he was in the temple. You would have figured before he slayed those two slave drivers and saved the Israelite slaves, you would have thought, here goes a perfect champion, a man who speaks fluent Egyptian, is in his prime, is strong, has clout, has royalty. And you know what? Here goes a man, the perfect ideal man that can deliver God's people from the hands of the Egyptians. But you know what? That's not the Moses that was used to deliver the Israelites from the hands of the Egyptians. It was 40 years later. It was a broken Moses. It was a Moses who smelled like sheep, a Moses who was sunburned and his face was weathered from time of shepherding his father's sheep. It was a man who had forgot his calling, forgot his destiny, a man who said, at one time maybe I would have done greatness, but now for sure God has chosen another. But I want to tell you that the calling that God has over your life, he's not counting you out because of the mistakes you've made, because of the bad choices you've made. Don't let people tell you that lie. God is always looking at your heart. He's looking at what's in it. Is there a desire to see revival come forth? Is there a desire to help the poor, to help the needy, to see healing in people's lives? That's what God is looking at. He's not keeping a record of your wrongs and the mistakes that you've made. And so I want to tell you that there is a process as God is forming you and making you. And I don't want none of you out there to give up. God never came against the drunkard or the sinner or the harlot. You know what he did? He put his arm up to defend them. He went to them and showed them that, hey, God loves you. He wasn't trying to condemn them. You know who he did stand against? It was against the religious spirit known in the Pharisees that was saying, hey, we're better than you. We stand above you. That's never the heart of God. God is a good God, and he understands that you are in need of his grace and are in need of his love, and that you make mistakes. And he wants you to know that he's waiting for you with his arms wide open. In the very moment that you want to cry upon him, there he will be with his arms wide open. So as I get into this poem, I just pray somebody out there is encouraged, that you would know that, you know, I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. I don't know who listens to this poem, who's not going to listen to this poem. But no matter what, you need to know that I am not walking in a place that Christian leaders or church leaders or even people not in church think I'm supposed to be in an order to speak about the things of God. But I tell you that I'm beyond that point. I heard God say the other day when I was taking a shower, this is what he told me. He says, when your professional career as a minister is completely over, then your calling as a son of God can begin. And I want to ask you all out there, is that maybe God saying the same thing to you? When will we stop being professional ministers? You know, when Saul fell, his main concern was that Samuel went out with them before the people so that they didn't think he had fallen or made a mistake. When David fell, the first thing he did was put his face in the ground and said, God, I have sinned against thee. And that is the heart that God is looking for. David was a man who God said was after his own heart. And in spite of all his mistakes, in spite of the many failures he had, David was a man after God's heart. And the story is full of people who made mistakes, who were less than perfect. But it's your heart that God is looking after. And it's that heart that keeps on wanting, that drives God to continue forming you into the person and the champion of the kingdom of God that he wants you to be. So I just pray you're encouraged as I read this poem and that you be blessed. And so here it goes. There's a sword that's been forged in destiny's flames. There's no face on the sword, just a heart full of praise. And the sword, it cries out, I'm created to war. But the sword, it just sits as if in vain it was forged. And the sword is not like any other you've seen. It was purchased by blood of an innocent king. And after his purchase, it was sent to a place where it was tested by fire. To the sword it gave way. And the sword lost itself, lost its form and its shape. But the flames also took all its pride and its hate. And after the flames, he was merged in the deep of the river of life, where he learned how to seek. And here in these waters, he learned how to soak. In these oceans of love, in these rivers of hope. And after it merged, there came a testing of faith. For it was beaten by love to reveal its true shape. And they're getting beaten by the greatest craftsman there is. The sword cries aloud, what's the purpose in this? It was there in the waters. I found your love like a kiss, and a vision of greatness, and a purpose to live. But now I've been broken. By your hand I've been crushed. Explain to me, Maker, what's become of your love? Because now I hardly resemble anything that is great. And when I see my reflection, it makes me turn away. And they're formless and crushed. The sword makes its case, and the craftsman, he listens till his point had been made. Then he began with the question as he looked at his work. Were you there when I laid the foundations for earth? Who shuts up the sea as if it was held back by doors? Who commands it to yield so that it doesn't come forth? Who's brought forth the morning since the beginning of days and has caused every season to remain in their place? Are you the giver of wisdom? Do you give life when you breathe? Should the clay tell the potter, what's this you're making of me? But listen, my son, you must allow me to take your life in my hands like a large piece of clay. You must trust in my love and not question my ways. For I see deep in your heart destiny that awaits. So come, my beloved, in my courts and be still. For although you have failed me, even this was my will. And before this is over, history will be made, and the world it will see what the great craftsman has made. I pray that you're encouraged by that poem. I pray that if that's you, if you're running from God and you're at a time of trial, and that you would understand that if you would read the Bible, you know, not just the scriptures of the do's and don'ts, but read the lives, the personal lives of people who were used by God and see the trials that they faced, the heartaches that they faced, the mistakes that they made, and in all of that, there came forth champions who touched the face of this earth with the power, the love, and the wisdom of God. And so I want you to understand that that can be you. We're no different from them. If God touched them and used them to speak to nations and to begin revivals and to make whole hearts once again, then He can also do the same thing with you. I pray you're encouraged, that you have a good night. Thank you.